that we are recording. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm sharing my screen and about to go into presentation mode. There we go. Start from the beginning. Okay. So welcome to Charter School Head Administrator 101. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bridget Russell. I'm the Interim Director at the Charter Schools Division here at PED. And we are hosting this at PCS&M's usual meeting time in collaboration with and at the request of PCS&M. So your job as a charter leader is basically make sure your kids learn. First and foremost, know what's in your contract. Track your academic data, including your mission goal data, if you have mission goals in your contract. Manage your finances, know the requirements and the deadlines that you have to meet, and how to find the resources to do so. It seems really simple, right? But it involves all this. In order to make sure that kids learn, you have to have effective teachers, engaging instruction, high quality curriculum, a facility that provides a safe and welcoming environment for your students. You have to submit safety plans and literacy plans and attendance plans and DASH plans and ED plans. You have to report your data in NOVA. You have to make sure that your budget balances. And on and on and on and on with HR, with IT. Running a school is a hard job. Your job is harder than my job. I will acknowledge that every day. From where I sit at the public education department in a sort of a unusual role at the PED, because the Charter Schools Division is part of the Public Education Department, the state education agency, the SEA, led by the cabinet secretary appointed by the governor. But in statute, the Charter Schools Division of this agency is also staff to the Public Education Commission, which is the authorizer of state charter schools. And so CSD sort of sits at the confluence of these two entities, your authorizer and your SEA. And we work for both. So charter schools are accountable to two entities. They're accountable to the state agency like any other public school in the state, but they're also accountable to an authorizer with whom they have a contract. So for your authorizer, your contract is the roadmap for everything you have to do. It contains a performance framework with academic, organizational, and financial indicators. It contains other material terms. We'll look more closely at the charter contract later on. And for state charters authorized by the Public Education Commission, there is a section of New Mexico Administrative Code 6.2.9, which governs PEC processes and how that authorizer provides oversight to charter schools. For the SEA on the PED side, you are responsible for following all federal and state laws, everything that's in the New Mexico Administrative Code, and other agency reports, requirements, guidance, memos, etc., and any federal and state reporting that's required. NOVA reporting to the state, and all of the federal reporting that is required by any federal grant that your school may have. So, and I will send out this this PowerPoint to everyone, and everything that appears turquoise in here is hyperlinked. So federal laws, there's the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, reauthorized as the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. The Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, governing special education, IEPs, 504 plans, and FERPA, protecting student privacy. New Mexico statutes, you're responsible for more than just the ones I've listed here, and the entirety. When you go into the New Mexico statutes, I mean, it's huge. It's enormous. But I linked to the to the most relevant sections. Chapter 6 on public finances, Chapter 10 on public officers and employees, including the Open Meetings Act, which governs your charter governing board meetings, and Chapter 22, Public Schools, which contains the Charter Schools Act, 22-8B, but all kinds of other laws governing all public schools. Any questions so far? Do I have this one in twice? I guess I see. So, and then there's the New Mexico Administrative Code, NMAC. So everything that's in statute, that's the what you have to do. And the administrative code is the how you have to do it. So every section, when you click on any NMAC section, it will have a section right up at the top that says statutory authority. And the statutory authority section of NMAC will tell you what sections of statute that NMAC is in support of, which is all helpful. So, and charter schools must comply with all provisions of NMAC unless they're waived by the non-discretionary waivers in section 22-8B-5 of statute. And we'll look at that on a slide shortly to come. So the section of administrative code that pertains to public education is Title VI, primary and secondary education. And then that section 629 governs PEC and CSD oversight of state charters. So the waivers section is in 22-8B-5 section C, and it states that the department shall waive requirements pertaining to all of those things listed and may waive graduation requirements. There are no charters currently that have a discretionary waiver for graduation requirements, but there's a lot of charters that have invoked the non-discretionary waivers. And they're called non-discretionary because granting them is not at the discretion of the PED because the statute says the department shall waive those requirements. One that has come up a lot recently is the evaluation standards for school personnel waiver. Because if a charter school is waiving evaluation standards, that means they're not using the Elevate system to evaluate teachers. They're using a system of their own. But I note that the waiver is for the evaluation standards, not for evaluating teachers at all. So every charter school still has to evaluate teachers who need those evaluations to advance in licensure. Okay. PED requirements outside of statute and code. So there's federal and state statute, there's NMAC, there's also agency guidance. You receive memos all the time from this agency. You get emails about things that you have to do that are not necessarily in statute or code, that are just agency guidance. And there are policy documents posted on the department's web pages, and I linked to all the offices and programs later to show the web pages. These requirements are, there are plans, there are reports, there are applications if you want federal funding or state funding. There are budget submissions, there are data reports, there are assessments that you have to do, there are trainings that you have to take. There are corrective actions that you have to perform in response to, for example, an Office of Special Education corrective action plan. If there's a parent complaint about services for a child with an IEP and they find that you haven't provided those services, then there's corrective actions. So the deadlines, some of these things have annual deadlines, some are multiple times a year, some are every so many years, like the Safe Schools Plan that's every 3 years, the Educator Evaluation Calibration Training that's every 2 years, Facilities Master Plan for charter schools every 5 years. And then down at the bottom, I made a note about accreditation. I know a lot of charter leaders are very worried about the PED's accreditation process. But what I want to point out here is that there are no additional submissions required for accreditation. Accreditation monitoring is done by this agency's staff, and charter schools don't have to do anything else. They have to, they have to follow all of the requirements that are monitored as part of accreditation, but there are no additional submissions. There is a dashboard where you can look at your accreditation status, but that is informational for you. You don't have to submit anything. And I've had that question, I can't even count how many times in the last few months. So there's no additional submissions for accreditation.
I'm sorry, Bridget, I missed that part. This is Jonathan Davis from Sun Mountain. Can you say just that last part that you said about accreditation? Because that is something that I was actually thinking about it today.
Yes, so accreditation is something the department does. The PED does this. The PED looks at all of the requirements, and there's 10 areas for, I don't have a slide for them, but there's 10 areas that the PED evaluates schools on for accreditation. One of them is board training. One of them is your Safe Schools Plan. One of them is attendance. One of them is assessments. They're sort of the big buckets. But you don't have to submit anything for the accreditation process. You have to do the things that are required by the Assessment Bureau for administering assessments. You have to do your board training because it's required in statute. You have to do your Safe Schools Plan because it's required in statute and code. But you don't have, so all of the accreditation things are things you're already doing. It's just PED is monitoring those 10 things to give the secretary a report. This school is, meeting all the requirements in these 10 areas. So it's a PED function. It's not a school function.
Okay, I think I understand. I guess maybe we'll get to this later, but I'm very curious about how all those things that we are doing for accreditation, all of which I'm aware of, are interacting or crossing over with expectations that are being held in the area of the Charter Schools Division, and or the PEC.
Great question. So let me keep going, and I will get to that. So for the agency's requirements, things that are in statute, things that are in code, things that are in agency guidance, the CSD has prepared a draft Google Sheet with multiple tabs. There's a tab for calendar, one for platforms with links, a head administrator checklist, required trainings, grant applications. We've tried very hard to make it complete, but it is not an official PED calendar. And there's a chance that there's something missing. So please, if don't take this as so authoritative that it's like, well, if it's not on there, I don't have to do it. Don't worry about it. You will still have to do it. And we're doing the best we can to capture everything. Ideally, this would be done by the agency and put out, and it would be authoritative and it would be definite and it would be guaranteed to include everything. But because this is something the CSD has been putting together because it doesn't exist anywhere else, we're doing the best we can. So the link on here to PED offices and programs, this link gives you shows you all of the offices and programs at the agency. And so literacy has their own page, college and career readiness has their own page. Special ed has their own page. There's also weekly LEA update emails. If you're not receiving those, please, email charter.schools and let us know. But they come out from the agency every week with upcoming deadlines. And what I've been asking for years is when those deadlines come out, like they get captured someplace at the agency, and there is an official PED list of everything you have to do, and it's all in one place. But right now, it's not all in one place, which is why we created ours. So this is a screenshot of the PED requirements calendar tab, and we've put it together by month and different types of submissions. There's a color code at the bottom for which ones are plans, which ones are applications, which ones are data reports. But we've tried to capture everything by what time of year you have to do it. And when you look at it this way, a person can see that you have a lot of requirements. I mean, a lot. Each one of these little boxes can have a manual and a guidance document and a needs assessment and an application and a data report. And, there's different levels of burdensomeness that go with all these requirements. But, every box in this matrix has documents that you have to read and things you have to do and forms you have to fill out. So governing board training. This is the one area of accreditation that CSD monitors and takes care of. So this is really one, like our division is in charge of this compliance requirement, and then other bureaus are in charge of other ones. So there are training hours required per New Mexico Statute 22-8B-5.1 for charter board members. New board members have to do 10 hours of training. Thereafter, board members have to do 5 hours of training a year. And the screenshot below is obviously it's not one of our charter schools. It's like a made up name so that we didn't use any school as an example. Is a board training tracker for the mythical Sunshine Academy. And so every charter school, district charters and state charters, have access to their own training tracker. CSD staff has it, and schools have view access to it. And so this tracker, which is maintained one for every one of the 101 charter schools in the state, tells who the board members are, who the board officers are, contact information, and have they done their training hours. And it is tracked by our team. And if you do not have access to your board training tracker, email charter.schools@ped.nm.gov and let us know. Don't email me, because all I'm going to do is just forward it to charter.schools. So in general, and so please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying don't email me or don't call me. There are certain things, of course, that you will want to talk to me about. But in general, for things like this, my information on the directory is wrong. I'm not getting the weekly emails. I can't access my board training tracker. How do I find my Epicenter logon? Those questions, I am just going to pass it on to somebody else on the team. So you will get a faster response if you email charter.schools directly instead of emailing me. Sometimes my email gets very backed up, whereas the charter.schools email, there's someone whose job it is to check that multiple times a day. So we try to be really responsive. And it's not like, I know sometimes people are nervous about those non-person emails. Like if you email licensure at PED, you think it's going to go into a black hole and you'll never hear from anyone. I promise you it won't, because they actually have some people in licensure who are working really hard to dig themselves out of the backlog and be responsive. But I understand the concern about emails like that. But I promise you, the charter schools email is different. Our team monitors it really, really closely, and they are responsive. So now we come to what your authorizer does. What is the PEC as authoriser's responsibility, and or APS for district authorizers, or Taos Municipal Schools, or Cimarron, or whoever your district authorizer is. So this charter authorizing cycle is, if you've seen this before, you've seen it on the PEC webpage that's linked down below. So first there's an application to open a new charter, then implementation year, then the school signs the implementation year team signs a contract with an authorizer, with the PEC or APS or Carlsbad schools or Socorro schools or Aztec schools, whoever the authorizer is. And then for the next 5 years of that contract term, or 4 years or 3 years, however long, 5 years is the maximum allowed by law, and most schools have a 5-year contract. During that time, your authorizer engages in monitoring, including an annual site visit to the school. That annual visit is mandated in statute. It's in the Charter Schools Act. So if you're a district charter and your authorizer hasn't visited you for 3 years, they're supposed to. And the CSD does visit every state charter school every year. So there's annual monitoring with an annual report every year of the charter contract. There's technical assistance provided as needed and as requested. And then sometimes there are amendments to the charter contract. And if you're a state charter, your amendment requests are submitted to us by Epicenter, our data system, and then they go on the PEC agenda, and the PEC approves or disapproves the amendment to the contract. Not sure how it works at districts for district charters, because the CSD doesn't have oversight. We do provide technical assistance at district charters, and we provide board training, but we don't monitor and do an annual visit and an annual report for district charters. And then the whole record of performance for that charter contract feeds into the renewal application. And if the authorizer votes to renew, it starts all over again with a new contract. So there is a Charter Schools Division webpage and a Public Education Commission webpage, and they're both linked on here. So the Charter Schools webpage has the directory of all the charter schools, and there's a changes tab on that shows changes from PEC to district or district to PEC, name changes, schools that open, schools that are closing. If there's anything on the directory that's not correct about your school or missing, please email charter.schools and let us know, because we really try to keep that updated. There's lottery guidance on our page. There's linked to the PEC web pages. We're going to be adding FAQs and additional resources to try to make the web page, more robust and more helpful to you. There's also a CSD staff page. It has contact information for everybody who works at the Charter Schools Division, both email and cell phone. Everyone at the PED now has a state cell phone, and those all should be listed for all divisions. If you go to the Office of Special Education webpage, over on the left-hand sidebar, there's an OSE staff page, and you can get the phone number or email for anyone that works at that bureau. The PEC pages include a page for contracts and annual reports for state charters. We don't have the contracts posted for district charters. The district authorizers post those. And we have started just recently, putting all of the amendments on the website along with the contract as well, because we don't want anyone going to download a contract and say, oh, this school is out of compliance. It says that their enrollment cap is 300, and I know they have 365 kids there. So like if that school had an enrollment cap increase amendment, that amendment would be in the folder. And so anyone going to look would see, oh, well, they've had their enrollment cap increased, or they had a grade level change, and now they're allowed to serve middle school as well as high school. There's also PEC meeting information, every PEC agenda and transcript of the meeting and all of the meeting materials for every meeting in compliance with the Open Meetings Act is posted on the PEC webpage. I should have added on here, there's also a link to a YouTube channel, and we record all of the PEC meetings and work sessions. So you can watch them, and so you can see every stumble and misstatement and everything any of us have ever said in a public PEC meeting. The annual calendar of PEC meetings is posted there. A list of a PDF with the commissioners and their contact information, their emails, which districts they represent, which schools are in which districts. And if you, again, if you see anything incorrect on any of these pages, please email charter.schools and let us know, because we really strive to be accurate. And then there are links to PEC policies and processes. That graphic I showed a couple of slides ago with the charter school cycle, that's on the policies and process pages. And that page links to the new application page, the implementation year page, the renewal page, and an amendments and notifications page. So it shows all of the amendment request forms and all of the notifications. This is for state charters only. District charters, your authorizer will have their own system. And for state charters, those are all submitted in Epicenter. And every amendment and notification has the first page is the how-to and the information. So notifications like change in head administrator, changing a board member, updating your governing board bylaws. Those are just notifications, and those are submitted 2 weeks before a PEC meeting, and they go on what's called the consent agenda, and they're all approved in one vote. Substantive amendments like adding grade levels, increasing your enrollment cap, those are substantive amendments. They're submitted 28 days prior to a PEC meeting, and CSD analyzes those and makes a recommendation, and the PEC debates and votes individually on those. And again, I can only assume that school boards do the same when the district authorizes a charter school. So the performance framework, so every contract includes these are the material terms in the contract. And a contract is designed to be basically your roadmap for how to run your charter school. So it includes a performance framework with academic, organizational, and financial indicators. The next slide shows the PEC's new performance framework. And districts will have their own performance frameworks in their contract, but there still should be a performance framework in your contract. The other material terms of the contract is the school's mission, its educational program, any renewal conditions, what grades are served, the enrollment cap, the location, a requirement to engage in tribal consultation if it's an Indian impacted school. Whether the school provides transportation and food service, whether it has any waivers invoked. And in the PEC contract, there's an amendment notification requirement. And those are submitted in Epicenter for state charters. And then there's also boilerplate language in every charter contract that says, and all applicable laws. This is the catch-all that gets you in trouble, because as we've seen with all of the public school code, there are a lot of applicable laws. When your contract says that you have to comply with all applicable laws, it's a catch-all, and it includes basically everything federal and state. And so that's where there's overlap between the authorizer and the state agency. So Jonathan, to your question about like what's the CSD and the PEC's role versus what's the PED's role. So this is the this is the new performance framework so only about half of the state charters are on this framework. If they started their new contract term in 2024 or after, they're on this framework. And so these are all of the academic, organizational, and financial indicators. And this indicator here, 3C, annual compliance requirement, this is like the catch-all indicator. It's sort of like a little performance framework within a performance framework. Every year, the PEC approves the compliance list, and it's a list of all of the like other applicable law requirements that the PEC is going to consider. If you, okay, for example, safe schools plan. So if the school, if a school is not in compliance with the safe schools plan requirement that's in statute, they'll get a ding on this annual compliance requirement indicator. If the school is not identifying English learners properly, or if the school is not submitting its NOVA data and holding up, reporting for the whole state, if the school has had a corrective action plan imposed by the Office of Special Ed and they're not in compliance with it, they're not doing what they were told to do in the plan, then that would be a working to meet or a does not meet on indicator 3C. Some requirements that are not in statute or in NMAC are not on this list. So if there's a requirement that one of the bureaus at PED says you have to do this, and it's not on that list that PEC adopts every year, so if it's not on the 25-26 compliance requirements list, that school's got a get out of jail free card for that piece of non-compliance with their authorizer, with the PEC, because the PEC is like, well, it's not on that list, so okay, you still meet standard on 3C. And then they might add it to the list the next year. But the PEC is pretty stringent about it has to be in statute or in code, or we're not putting it on that list. Any questions about this? Okay. So, and then the next slide is actually just pertaining to the PEC performance framework too. You see how there's a column over there that says like how it's measured and when it's rated. We sort of reshuffled the performance framework to show the different times of year when performance framework indicators get rated and how they get rated. So like two of the indicators, they're just rated based on the audit data. Whatever the state auditor's report comes out, that's what determines the indicator. Or there's two of them that are rated just by a formula after when the 40-day data comes out. Others, the CSD has to rate those. Any questions about this? Okay, one more slide that is state charter relevant only, and then I promise we're done with that, or two more. So 629 NMAC governs how the PEC and the CSD oversee state charter schools. So 62912 lays out the process for site visits and annual reporting, PEC issuing a notice of performance based on the annual report, and in section 13, corrective action and the intervention ladder. There's a flow chart on the next slide that sort of puts this as a visual. So in the annual report section, if there are areas of unsatisfactory performance in the annual report, the PEC will issue a notice of unsatisfactory performance. And then that's all they do. They wait until the next year's annual report, and either it's corrected and case closed, that's all there is to it, or it's repeated. And if it's repeated, so you've got unsatisfactory performance, say on your financial audit indicator for 2 years running, the PEC will issue a notice of uncorrected unsatisfactory performance. And then they will decide, is it serious enough that we want to put it on the agenda, Or do we just want to let it go and monitor it through the annual report process? And more often than not, it just gets monitored through the annual report process. Sometimes they will bring a school before PEC. And then, so the flow chart down below, if there's a concern, which can be uncorrected and unsatisfactory performance on an annual report, or it could be other concerns that are brought to the commission. A school will be on the PEC meeting agenda. If the PEC issues a notice of concern, the school will propose a corrective action plan, and then the PEC will either accept that or modify it. And then the school implements the corrective action plan. And once it's finished successfully, the PEC votes to close it. Or if the corrective action is not taken, then the PEC might take further action. Any questions?
I have a question. Sorry,
Yes.
this is Jonathan Davis again.
Yeah.
Uh, so Bridget, my question is, from the annual report, how does all this timing of correcting or having something repeated, how does it relate to the annual site visit and from the charter schools division? And, if we were given, a couple small things that needed to be corrected, do we have time after the site visit to go ahead and correct those things immediately before it's put on the report to the PEC? I just don't fully understand that timeline.
Okay, that is a great question. So what Jonathan's asking about is the CSD site visit to a school. And then so on the previous slide, the phase 1 annual report is 30 days after the site visit. We send preliminary ratings on the performance framework to the school. So let's say the site visit is done, like you just had your site visit in April, and none of your board train members had done any of their training at all. So we might flag that as a possible area for follow-up. We're almost at the end of the school year and none of your board members have any training. Or the school might be late on their Safe Schools plan. Their Safe Schools plan was due in December and they didn't submit it. That would be an area of concern. You need to get that taken care of. So those areas of concern that CSD identifies at the site visit, those get taken care of by June 30th at the end of the school year or not. So if you submit your Safe Schools plan and get it approved, it was late, you'll get a working to meet on that indicator. But if you just don't submit it all the way up until June 30th, once June 30th comes, the school year's done. And if it's not submitted, then that's a does not meet. So that will go into the annual report. And the PEC, when the PEC does notices of performance based on the annual report, anything that's working to meet, that's fine. Unless it's an academic indicator, but any organizational or financial indicator that's working to meet, the PEC is not worried about it. They're worried about does not meet standard ratings on the framework. And the first year, nothing happens. It's only if it's repeated 2 years in a row, then they decide, do we want the school to come before us and, tell us what the problem is? Or do we want to just keep an eye on it and monitor it through the annual report next year? But anything that was identified as a possible area of concern after the site visit, that could end up being, meet standards. So if the team flagged, you haven't done any of your board training, so we're bringing this to your attention. You might have a board retreat planned for mid-May. And so all the board training would get done at that May board retreat. And then you would be meet standard, you'd be in compliance. Does that answer the question?
So I'm hearing 30 days after the site visit, we're gonna get basically a performance rating document from Charter Schools Division, and that we essentially have until June 30th to
Yes.
make sure that all those things are done.
Yes, exactly.
And then we're going to report those directly to the main person that was kind of heading up the site visit with charter schools.
Or whoever was like, if it was the Safe Schools plan, for example, you would work with the Safe and Healthy Schools Bureau, and then they would let us know that it was complete. But if you're concerned, if you wanted to make sure that we knew, you absolutely could, include your, CC your site visit lead, when you communicate with Safe and Healthy Schools or with special ed or with language and culture or whichever bureau you're having compliance issues with.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Bridget.
You're welcome. And so just so you know, those preliminary ratings after the site visit, most of those ratings are just more data needed because like it gets rated at the end of the school year because there's very few of the indicators that get rated at the site visit itself. Lucy?
Yes, Jonathan, in particular, once you review the performance framework, I don't know how much reading you've done on it, but if you see for the ed program indicator, there it states if you meet the standard, then that's perfect fine. You get that meets the standard rating the day of the site visit. But if there are some elements of the educational program that was not verified at the site visit, and you end up with a rating of working to meet or does not meet standard, it clearly states that you have 90 days to provide information or additional support documentation that supports that the ed program is being implemented. So I would strongly recommend that you look over the performance framework and the business rules so you could really study it and see what needs to be done.
Thank you, Lucy. And so I know that we CSD is going to schedule additional sessions that do a deep dive on the performance framework and the monitoring of the framework for state charter schools. I know there are a number of district charter people on, so I'm not going to spend as much time on our performance framework because it's just not relevant for the district charter leaders that are on the call. But we will do. We've got one scheduled in July. Is it July, Lucy? Yeah, we've got one scheduled in July for renewing schools, but we'll schedule a couple of others for schools that are already on that performance framework and just want to understand it better because it's long and there's a lot of moving parts to it.
And also, Jonathan, and for the other head administrators that are PECs, authorized schools, once the final annual report is ready and it goes out, we do a lot of back and forth communication with our schools based off of a Google form. So if there's ratings that you disagree with and you have supporting documentation that is being done, we will have those conversations with you. And ratings, if you received a rating anything other than meets the standard, that rating can possibly change as well. So up until the very end, before they are presented to the commission at their meeting, we can make changes as long as you provide the necessary documentation.
And let me just say that we are not looking like we don't have a quota of like we have to give we can only give so many meet standards. We can give everybody a meet standard on everything if every school is meeting the standard, and that would be a good thing. We want that. So we don't want to rate a school does not meet standard or working to meet standard when you deserve to be rated meet standard. I mean, we want to be fair. So if there are extenuating circumstances, if there are things, and sometimes when schools give us feedback, we think we should get meets on this. Sometimes we look at the data and we say, I'm sorry, we can't. The criteria are right there in the business rules and we can't do it. But sometimes we can do it. Sometimes there are extenuating circumstances. Somebody made a mistake. Somebody didn't report something. So please, if you think your rating might be wrong, you lose nothing by asking. And we're always happy to review it. So the next slide is the different reasons that a school could be on the PEC agenda. And I think that this one probably does go for district charters. District charters could be on the school board's agenda for any of these reasons. So it should say really charter schools on the authoriser's agenda. So new administrators can be on the agenda when they've just started to come and just meet the commissioners. The PEC has a consent agenda for notifications. Those aren't discussed individually. They're just approved the whole consent agenda at a time. School boards do the same thing. There's a CSD director's report. And if a school is on the director's, like I inform the commission whenever a school has a special ed corrective action plan open and there's no action taken, it's just informing the PEC. Sunshine Academy has a special ed corrective action plan. There's no discussion and no action taken for director's report items. Annual reports. So when the annual report is complete, it's presented to the commission by CSD staff and the commission votes to approve the report. Schools can be on the agenda for an amendment request if they're requesting to increase their enrollment cap or change their mission goal or purchase a new facility and move to another location. There's an amendment request and the school will be in an discussion and action item. If a school is being placed on the intervention ladder, if there's a notice of concern, renewal hearings, and in the very rare cases when the PEC is considering revocation, a revocation hearing. We always notify a head administrator anytime the school is on the PEC agenda. If it's consent agenda, you'll get an email from charter.schools. If it's anything else, you'll get an email from me. So to recap, your job, number one, make sure kids learn. And there's so much that goes into this. Being an instructional leader, supporting your teachers, giving them feedback, getting them coaching when they need it, making sure they have access to curriculum, to supplies, making sure your kids' social emotional needs are met, making sure that you have a safe and secure and welcoming facility for your kids, keeping in touch with families, complying with IEP goals, and getting kids the support they need for any learning disabilities that they have, tracking your data, knowing what's in your contract, managing your finance, and please use your boards for this. Your board, part of their job is to be your safety net for financial things. Like the finances aren't all on you. The board approves the budget. The board is supposed to spot check to make sure finances are being managed the way they ought to be. And then finally, knowing the requirements, the deadlines, where to find resources, how to navigate the complicated compliance landscape that is the New Mexico public educational world. And we are finished. Any questions?